All right, thank you everyone for joining us today for Secondary Health Science Education Across State System. ACG has been working long and hard on this joint online seminar with Scott Hess from the National Consortium for Health Science Education. So without further ado, I'm going to kick it off to Scott, and he is going to introduce some of our panelists and do an opening presentation for everyone who's watching.
Yeah, hi, this is Scott Hess, and I represent the National Consortium, and this web seminar really we're doing to promote and to explain why we're promoting a cross-state system for health science education in our high schools. It's at a very critical time where we think that this is very important for us to do, trying to get that kind of consistency and commonality between the states. A brief history of the National Consortium. We actually started back during the school to work time when we were approached by the Department of Labor and the Department of Education to create a national career path model organized around health sciences. We were asked to develop this model so that it could be used as a national model that represented not only expectations of students, but then also the expectations of national advisory groups that oversee our cluster areas. After we got through developing the National Career Pathway Model, the Department of Education then started to start other career clusters using the model that we had developed. Over a period of time, some of the things that we accomplished between then and now is, and at the beginning especially, is when we brought together industry and post-secondary education from across the country. And we sat down with those folks and asked them what it is they thought that a high school student would be able to know and do as they transitioned from high school to go into post-secondary programs. Based on that information, we formed a set of standards. And those standards have been revalidated several times since then, and most recently in 2015. We've also, over a period of time, revalidated those, as I said, and we're at a point now where we think it's very important that for us to share what those standards are and to work at getting support from organizations for the work that we have done. We've worked closely with a variety of organizations, and most specifically, you can see these three organizations that we work with as part of our outreach work that we have done, trying to get employers and industry to support the national standards that we have established. And if you look at the healthcare industry and health professions, you can really divide them into three different groups. If you walk into a hospital and take a look at people who are working there, or any medical facility or long-term care hospital, what you'll see is that the workers fall into these three groups. We find physicians, we find nursing, of course, and then everybody else falls into the category that we call allied health. We've been able to get support from these organizations on our standards that we've established to get their kind of support, so when students complete our programs and can demonstrate that they've met our competencies, these organizations and their post-secondary partners will recognize a credential that a student has that moves them on into post-secondary education. So if you look at nursing, for example, there are three major organizations: the American Association of Colleges of Nursing, the National League of Nursing, and the American Nursing Association. All of those organizations have supported the work that we've done with our standards. You'll hear in a few minutes from Allied Health, and Allied Health really represents close to 185 different careers in allied health, and then the physicians. And there's really a shortage in all of these areas, which provides us an opportunity at a unique time to really increase the number of students that we have participating in our health science programs. So we're promoting this cross-state consistency. And the reason that we're doing that, it seems to make a lot of sense. If you look at what healthcare professions require nationally, in order for students to work after they complete a post-secondary program, they have to sit for an exam that provides them a certification, a licensure, or some sort of registry, and they have to complete that before they're able to enter the workforce. What this has done, especially at the post-secondary level, is it's moved them to have a very similar content, common content as well as rigor for all of their programs, whether that's an allied health program or a nursing program or even pre-med programs. And the reason is, again, is that they each have to prepare students for the exam that they need to take. Those are national exams, which makes sense. Standards aren't different between state borders. So what a nurse needs to know and be able to do is the same in one state as it is in another. There's the consistency between those programs. And that's the same with the allied health programs too, that kind of consistency. And the goal of a post-secondary program is to prepare those students to sit for that national exam, that they can demonstrate that they have those competencies. When you look at the high school programs that we have, there's a real disconnect where at the post-secondary level, it's very connected between post-secondary education and the workforce. We don't see that same kind of collaboration or connection between our high schools and our post-secondary programs. And if it makes sense for that all of our post-secondary students are meeting the same competencies in order to move on into the workforce, we think that it makes a lot of sense to get our high schools on board so that we're preparing all high school students to move into post-secondary education, so they've demonstrated that they have the competencies to be successful at that next level. So we've done that for a number of reasons. There are not only the inconsistency between content and rigor between our high school programs, what we end up with is many unprepared students entering post-secondary education. Not many of our students across the country have an opportunity to participate in health sciences. We also have a very low percentage of student participation. If you take a look at the number of students that we have in our high schools, you can see on this slide that we have almost 15 million high school students. And those high school students are in over 26,000 secondary schools. When counselors do a interest inventory with students, what they found is that as many as 20 to 30% of high school students express an interest in pursuing a health profession. What we've seen, though, nationally, and in 2014, what we found was that there was less than 300,000 of our secondary students who were actually concentrators in a health science program. So when you take a look at this, what this really means is that if 20% to 30% of that 15 million students had an opportunity to participate in health science programs, they would take advantage of that. There's a huge workforce shortage, and we'll discuss more about those as we go through the seminar. But in medicine, for physicians, there's a huge demand for those, and you'll hear about some of the demands for students in allied health as well as in nursing. If you look at physicians, for example, there's a huge demand for physicians, and we face a shortage of over 46,000 primary care doctors by the year 2020. Over the past 17 years, the programs for primary care doctors has increased by 4%, yet the population has increased by 20%. We're really facing a critical time over the next 10 years to begin to create and develop more physicians as well as other healthcare workers. And then according to the Bureau of Labor Statistics, the projected growth for physicians will be over 14% between now and the year 2024. So how are we going to meet those demands? It's very critical for the country. It also provides a great opportunity for our states to begin offering health science programs in all of your high schools, especially in rural areas. where very few of our high schools actually have programs, yet there's a huge demand for healthcare workers in rural as well as urban areas. So what we're going to do is we're going to listen to some of the presenters from the organizations that we've gotten endorsements from. First, we're going to hear from Carol Stacy, who's a nursing program director at Lansing Community College, and she's going to talk about nursing and what the needs are, and then also how they support our standards, our national standards, as a way to better prepare students to go on into their nursing programs. Lynn Brooks, who's the executive director of the Health Professions Network, which represents close to 185 different allied health areas, will discuss the implications that this shortage is going to have on allied health and how a common, consistent, rigorous program across the country in our high school programs will help, one, more students understand about what allied health careers are and what their opportunities are. We're also going to hear from Nancy Allan, who's the Associate Director from HOSA, the Future Health Professionals. We have thousands of students who participate in this student organization, and the student organization, HOSA, really supports our national standards, and a lot of what they're doing align with what our teachers are teaching, and so it's very important that we have that kind of collaboration with HOSA. We're going to have Edson Barton, who's the CEO of Precision Exams. And Precision Exams was selected a number of years ago to help us develop an assessment where we were able to have students demonstrate competencies aligned with what our national standards are. And our hope is that as students complete that assessment and they apply for post-secondary programs, we've been told by the organizations that we're working with that as they understand what those competencies are, that certainly gives those students a leg up when they apply to a nursing or to an allied health program. And he's going to talk a bit about what that assessment is. So as your students go through that program, this assessment is available that they could have, that they could take anywhere in the country. If we have a common system across the country, then that assessment will be common, and anywhere they apply for entrance into a program, we're hoping that they all understand what competencies they have and that they have demonstrated those aligned with our national standards. And then at the end, we want to have Kate Blosburn talk a little bit about advanced CTE and how they have been involved with the development of the career clusters, how what we've done as a national consortium aligns with what their expectations are. And what we want to do, hopefully, is to encourage states who don't participate with the national consortium to get involved. It's great to sit down with health science leaders from across the country representing all of the states and work together as it comes time to validate standards or to work on different issues for health science, to develop curriculum and other kinds of things. So what we would really like to do is to encourage states who aren't participating in the consortium to become members so that they can help have the same kind of impact in their state and help us provide that consistency across the country. So with that said, let me turn the time over now to Carol Stacy, representing nursing.
Thank you, Scott. As Scott said, I am the nursing program director at Lansing Community College, which is in Lansing, Michigan. We are an urban campus, the second largest community college in the state, with over 450 students in our nursing program and 1,200 students in our pipeline for the nursing program. One of the things that, as a community college, we look at where are our predicted healthcare shortages as we make program decisions. And we find that as of March 2015, there were 18 million Americans who have gained access to care through the Affordable Care Act. We also look at what supply and demand is going to be. And so a recent study shows that 15% of the nursing workforce is projected to retire within the next 2 to 3 years, which will certainly increase the demand for the students completing our program. And in 2016, it seems that the #1 challenge for the healthcare industry is going to be to hire enough quality healthcare workers to meet the need or the demand. And then we have to look at, when we develop curriculum, what is a quality healthcare worker? What are those new and emerging roles for healthcare workers, not only in 2016, but through 2020, 2025? So there are going to be many new and emerging roles for those workers. We do know that the healthcare worker today and in the future is going to have to be very technology savvy, be a strategic thinker, and very customer focused. It used to be that when we talked to employers that their #1 skill they desired was the ability to write and communicate, and now it is more technology and being customer focused. So we've had to look at that in our curriculum. We also look at where are the health professions going, especially nursing, and so in this chart shows that in 2013, at least 44% of healthcare professions needed some college and an associate's degree, a bachelor's degree, and 17% a master's degree. And so the amount of education that's being required is certainly one that we have to be aware of. Students completing our program will have an associate's degree, but to be hired, they are having to show that they are enrolled in a Bachelor's of Science of Nursing program. So we're seeing the increased demands for their educational level. We're very fortunate here in Michigan. We have a strong state lead in our Department of Education for Health Science. We have been a member of the National Consortium since, in fact, we were one of the founding members here in the consortium. And so we have all of our health science programs. It's a statewide system, statewide curriculum for health science, all based on the National Health Science Foundation standards. So when a student comes to us and says that they were in a health science program from one of our high schools or one of our career technical education programs, we have a good idea of the consistency that was in that curriculum. We're seeing an increased number of students vying for admission to the community college. We are a bigger bargain than some of our university colleagues for those first 2 years. We have a very competitive applications process, and the very stringent financial aid criteria, as financial aid is now being looked at as to only fund what a student absolutely needs to have. Not only is our community college, but most of the community colleges in the state, and I think in other states, are going to guided pathways for students. So when a student arrives at the college, they are going to have to identify which pathway they want to enroll in. We are developing courses that will be a quick way for students to look at all of the different educational offerings we have in a particular pathway. What we're finding, though, is that students in high school who said that they wanted to be have one of the health careers have a much better idea of which pathway and what classes that they need to take when they arrive on campus. So what we've learned is that with that statewide curriculum, we know what they've learned in health science. And on our selective admissions process, we do give extra points for students that have been in a high school health science program, and now we are asking to see what their certificate or what their score was on the National Health Science Assessment. If they mastered the foundation standards, they are given 3 more points than if they were not able to master it but did complete the health science program. And they are able to also step out of that survey course for the guided pathways, and also are able to not have to do the medical terminology requirement. So what we're looking for is the perfect schedule, courses in the right order for each student. So they're not here, they're wasting time and using up financial resources. It's very, very focused on what each student needs and based on what they're coming to us from high school. Thank you. I'll turn it over to Lynn Brooks.
Okay, here we go. Carol, thank you very much. I'm with the Health Professions Network, and our focus for the 20 years we've been in existence is allied health. And what we've tried to be is a network or a convening body for allied health professional associations to come in and talk about the issues involved in their advocacy, the regulations, education, so forth. Over the time, we've added educational levels and institutions into our association, as well as certification bodies. Employers have also been in there. But again, the focus has primarily been allied health. And in allied health, for the 20 years we've been in existence, and for some of us a little bit longer, there are a lot of changes that are going on in the field that are driving changes in what we do and how we do it. A quick look at these. First of all, obviously, there's a changing landscape. People are living longer. They're expecting different types of health care. The boomer retirements are adding to that retirement base, but we're also, with the boomer retirements, we're losing experienced health care workers at the bedside. And more importantly than that, we're losing experienced educators. And that's kind of created some changes in what we do and how we're going to do it. Reimbursement issues, regulation issues have also kind of crept in the last couple of years. Most of us have seen the changing delivery system. We're moving from the traditional bricks and mortar structures and network systems and processes. We're shifting over to preventive health measures, community programs. We're getting more into convenience as consumers. We're looking for lower costs, easier access to care for the different needs that we're having, and that has been a change. Along with this, and driving a lot of it, has been changes in the management structure. CEOs are being replaced by innovative thinkers and strategists, strategic people that don't have a healthcare background. A lot of the boomer management that has guided healthcare for the last 15, 20, 25 years is being replaced by the new generational values, and they're working across multi-cultures within their generation. So that's a good news, bad news situation. The traditional hierarchical management thinking and system is being replaced by new titles and new directions. The Vice President of Ancillary Services is long gone. It's been replaced by the Vice President of Strategic Thinking and Innovative Programs. We're looking at new ways, new directions, and new titles. Nursing is taking a bigger lead in the management of hospitals and managing a lot of these new programs. But one of the biggest changes that's driving all of this is the changes in technology. A lot of professions within the industry are seeing new changes, new technology, new pieces of equipment that's coming in that's making diagnosis and treatment a lot easier, a lot more cost efficient, as well as being more accurate. We're getting more into non-invasive technology that's replacing high-risk surgeries, and that has really accelerated over the last 10 to 15 years. Cardiology used to be a lot of intensive high-risk surgeries, but now they're getting to be, I hate to say routine, but a lot easier, and the technology is making that available. Telemedicine is allowing centers of excellence like MD Anderson and some of the specialized centers around the country to expand their influence and their reach around the country. And that has added a lot to the rural facilities and their ability to treat their patient base. Genomics is becoming a big factor in as we are getting into that, clearing a lot of the ethics and the patent hurdles. This will accelerate and drive the pathways using genomics as a base for diagnosis, treatment, as well as prevention. This is going to do a lot to get certain cultures and things like that into better treatment, better care management for a lot of their particular illnesses and chronic diseases. But the biggest, I think, thing that's going to drive a lot of this is the revision and overhaul of the electronic medical record systems. We're now into electronic downloads and input, and we're moving to a cloud technology, and we're getting a lot more into constant monitoring. Patients no longer have to go into a hospital or their doctor's office to have things written down in paper and pencil. They can go into CVS, have all this electronically done, and fed to their file on the cloud. And a lot of my IT people that I work with say that it's just really a matter of time until we get into a artificial intelligence taking over and driving a lot of our health care. It will replace a lot of the diagnosis that is done and treatment plans and patterns that are being done now by healthcare professionals. And we're moving from literally B to C is what I had on the first side. We're moving from bricks and mortar to clicks and technology. And that is driving many, many of the changes that we are seeing in the healthcare system. There is no way that we can have all of these changes in the workplace and the delivery systems without having a corresponding change in the workforce, how they're trained, what they're taught, and how they operate and function. We see the traditional job structures there that come out. We get new projections on them every 2 years. Registered nurses, physicians, they have long been the face of healthcare. But if you look at those next four, they're home health aides, nursing aides, and so forth. This is where the volume of new jobs have been increasing steadily over the last 4 to 6 to 8 years. As we shift from that inpatient type system to the outpatient and community management, we're seeing more of these folks being needed. And by the way, in parentheses there, like for home health aides, you see ST, short-term, OJT, on-the-job training, next less than 1 year. That's just the training time that goes along with this. But this is where the explosion of jobs are. And then you can see down below some of the other traditional jobs in the technology assistant range professions. I can go to the next page here and you can see more of those. And these are the traditional job titles that we've been training people for. But there's a new element that's coming in out there. Several years ago, the CMS gave out $2 billion to a variety of healthcare systems around the country and said, develop some innovative programs for the new delivery system. And they did that. And when I went down and looked at some of the job titles that were in those new innovative programs, these were some of the job titles that I saw. What are the skill sets in there? What are the competencies? What are these people? Do they have a nursing background? Do they have an allied health background? What do they do? Where do they work? The fact is, these are the new job titles that are coming out everywhere, and it's not what we're seeing here. What is developing is a need to get the right skill sets. All of these are made up of different skill sets. The right skill sets, right time, the right place to deliver the right care. It's not about traditional job titles. That's the new system that we are seeing kind of run rampant here. And this is why core curriculums are starting to be important to us, and why this program that we're getting involved with and supporting is going to help us. The one thing that we felt like we needed to do in HPN was to determine what the core competencies in the curriculum really was. And we convened a group over the last year that kind of pulled all the different core competencies, skill sets, curriculum that was considered basic around the country, and crosswalked all of those and came up with one skill set or one set of standards for these core competencies. We worked with the Department of Labor. They've put those into the pyramid that they have for so many other industries, and we are now working with them to develop that or get it published and sent out so that we can make that available and work with it. The idea that we're looking at is what we're trying to create the same page for all the students that are getting into healthcare to be trained on in that entry level. We've identified the core curriculum that goes along or across all career paths, and we want everybody to have that exposed to them in their early learning, and we want it to be validated. We're looking at some program for stackable credentials, career pathways, where kids can go up a career pathway one step at a time instead of having to invest a lot of years before they hit the bedside or before they really get in there and get after it. And, we need to create our version of the education pipeline, standardize all of this, and take our efforts across the board. And that's the next steps, and this program that we're supporting here goes right along with that. Healthcare is the great future. The projections that I looked at projected something like 9.8 million jobs across the country in the next 10 years, and 3.9 of those were in healthcare, 39%. So we're still the biggest industry that's out there that has the growth, that has the more opportunity, and with what we're seeing here and the potential we have, what we're proposing here is a good way to build the base of the education system, get kids involved with it, and move them on up through the chain. So with that, let me turn it over to Nancy Allan with HOSA, and one of our big partners in what we're trying to do. Nancy?
Okay, thank you, Lynn. Hi, I'm Nancy Allan, and I work with National HOSA as the Associate Director. We are a national student organization, sometimes called a career and technical student organization, that supports the good work that goes on in health science programs, health science clusters, programs of study throughout our nation, also with some chapters internationally. We certainly value the work that goes on from the National Consortium of Health Science Education, and we appreciate these standards that help prepare the pipeline of future health professionals. And so we begin with middle schoolers. We have a new division for middle school students to expose them to all the opportunities there are under the health science umbrella, and we take them through high school, post-secondary collegiate membership, and then on to alumni and throughout their careers. HOSA was founded in 1976, and we are represented by some amazing students. We have our national officers represented here on this slide. You can see the diversity and the states that they represent, and they are elected annually at our conference in June, and they go out and they have an opportunity to connect with health professionals and partners like the National Consortium for Health Science Education and also HPN. So these are the students that we have the honor to work with and also expose them to what their future could be in health professions. There's our structure, very similar to many national organizations that you may be a part of. We are governed by a board of directors. We have our national officers speaking on the lower tier here of this framework. And then we have a national staff. We're headquartered right outside of Dallas, Texas, with some remote workers in Washington, D.C. and other areas of the country. We work with state associations and state leaders, many who are a part of the national consortium. We work with state education agencies, and our local chapters are a part of high schools, middle schools, post-secondary collegiate chapters, and they are led by teachers, many who are health professionals who transitioned over to the high school classroom to engage these young people in health professions. We're excited that we have had over 33 years of continuous membership increases, and this year we'll hit an all-time high of 205,000 members. And we have chapters in 49 of our states, as well as chapters in Canada and Mexico, American Samoa, Germany, and Italy. As I said, we're 40 years old. You can see the number of alumni that we've impacted since 1976. We have a large and diverse population of members. We have over 4,300 chapters this year. The average chapter size is 42. What we believe that HOSA provides is a real connection to the curriculum. We don't like to think of HOSA, Future Health Professionals, as an extra curricular organization. We see ourselves as a curricular organization, which brings us back to the health science standards that have been discussed in earlier presentations. We believe that students need to be connected to the curriculum, and we do that in a variety of ways through chapter activities, clinical or work-based learning experiences. We're going to talk a little bit later about our competitive events program, conferences that students have an opportunity to attend, and what we really hope that we're preparing these young people to make informed decisions about their next steps past middle and high school. And so we're exposing them to all the opportunities that are afforded through at least in high school. They're kind of narrowing down that they're interested in health professions, and as they move through their health science education program, through opportunities offered through their membership with HOSA Future Health Professionals, then when they get to their post-secondary collegiate programs, they understand what it is they're getting into and what a day in the life of those professionals would be like. Our competitive events program is a large part of what we do. We're extremely proud of this program as it offers 57 different events that students may compete in. And so throughout the nation and in our chapters outside of the United States, they have an opportunity to compete, usually in the spring, at their state leadership conferences in one of these events. If they place first, second, or third in the event, then they qualify to move on and represent their state association at the national conference or international conference, as we rebranded this year, and then they get to compete against the best and the brightest from other chartered associations. So you can see from this laundry list, there's a category for health professions, which is somewhat career specific for students interested in physical therapy, veterinary medicine, biomedical careers. There's another category, the second column, that's written tests where students get to showcase their skills in medical math, medical terminology, other pathophysiology, pharmacology. We have a new event this year on behavioral health, which is going to be very popular for us. And then we have emergency preparedness events, and then moving on to the next slide here, leadership events, teamwork events, everything from biomedical debate to health education, forensic medicine, and then lastly, the column there, recognition events. What I'd like for you to take from our competitive events program is that it's important to us that these events are aligned to the National Health Science Standards. The competitive events serve as a head fake for our students to get them to developed to practice and to refine their academic, their leadership, and their technical skills. And so when we talk about the competitive events program to our local chapter advisors, to our state advisors, we're able to say to them, this is part of the curriculum. It's tied to a consistent set of standards that are going to prepare these HOSA members to be successful in their next steps. So the competitive events program is a rigorous and relevant program of events. The guidelines are published for students to see what they'll be tested on, to see what skills they may be asked to do. The rubrics and the guidelines are all on our website at hosa.org, along with this resource that we created where we took all 57 events. We looked at the 11 foundational standards that you've heard about from the other presenters, and we said, this is where these events reinforce the curriculum that you're teaching. So the competitive events serve as a teaching resource. We believe that they enhance the instruction of the health science standards, and then they truly help students to develop, practice, and refine their skills. They also get to connect with health professionals from across the nation because many of the health professionals come in, volunteer, and serve as judges for these events. We appreciate what the consortium has done to help us keep these competitive events consistent, to keep them relevant to what is happening in healthcare as they revise their standards, as they go through a process to make sure that the standards are still what is current for students to know and be able to do. Then we look at our competitive events program as a way to contribute to and help students be successful along their path to become our next generation of health professionals. Each year, we have the highlight of our membership year, which is our International Leadership Conference. We hold that throughout various locations in the nation, and this year will be in Nashville, Tennessee. We expect this will be the largest conference that in the history of HOSA. We're expecting over 9,000 attendees, and that will be June 22nd through the 25th. And at this conference, we'll have a HOSA Expo where students can speak with organizations who represent different health professions or different colleges and universities. They'll have a chance to be a part of the competitive events program. We have educational symposium as part of the conference, as well as recognition sessions where students may be receiving scholarships that will help them along their pathway to become health professionals. So just in closing, if there are any questions, feel free to reach out to HOSA. We feel like we really have the fun part because we get to really work with the young students as they're making decisions about their future, and we appreciate what the consortium has done to add value to the student organization. And thank you. At this time, I'll turn over the presentation to Edson, who works with precision exams.
Excellent. Thanks, Nancy. Precision exams, we focus on providing the certificate program for the National Consortium for Health Science Education, and we do that through the National Health Science Assessment. It really is a great tool, and as I get going, I want to emphasize that the assessment itself really speaks to the consistent common knowledge across all health professions. And so it is an end-of-program, end-of-pathway assessment that really helps lead to all of the different programs. And as we have spoken throughout this webinar, each group has really stressed the need for greater participation in the high schools, moving into the colleges and into the workforce because of the shortages there. And so this assessment helps provide the framework for which students can build upon to get to that next level. There is a blueprint that's available for the exam, and that can be found on the National Consortium for Health Science Education website or on the Precision Exams website. And it outlines what standards will be tested and what percentage of the test is dedicated to each section. So here you can see that the foundations of academic foundations is 17% of the assessment, communications is 10%, systems 5%, et cetera, et cetera. And so it gives educators a real view of what will be expected of them and of their students, and then how to prepare for that as well. And there's a host of tools that are available to prepare students for the exams, not only that the consortium itself has prepared, but also publishers across the country have also prepared and done a fantastic job in developing those. The certificate itself is really a fantastic certificate because it is nationally recognized as an end pathway exam, and it has been taken annually by over 20,000 students and is growing every year across the nation. It's really one of the premier health science certificate programs that a student in high school can earn and move forward into either a job or a college position. Now, for a student, it becomes very valuable because one of the things that studies have shown of students going into, again, either the workforce or into college is that they have a hard time articulating the knowledge and skills that they've actually learned. And in our high school programs in health science, many of them across the country are doing some really amazing things. But students come out and they don't know how to recognize themselves for that. And so this certificate program, the National Health Science Assessment, helps to validate for students the skills that they've actually learned and attained. And then they can use that in their portfolios for jobs, for their college applications. And it also helps instructors. We talked a little bit about, Scott talked about earlier, the misalignment between high schools and what is being taught at the college level. And so by having a consistent standard set and then a method for evaluating that standard set on the student side, it provides a much easier articulation path into college programs. And Carol spoke about that with her work in the college system in Michigan. And so it provides a really great resource there. Now, the certificate is fantastic, but equally as important to the certificate are the standards themselves, because students need to be able to communicate those standards properly to their college, the potential colleges, or to their potential employers. And so with every certificate, on the direct back side of that certificate, a student receives their score report, and they also see a breakdown of the standards that they learned. And so on their resumes or their college applications, they can put those standards directly on that to help identify for those potential colleges or employers what they actually learned. This also becomes a really great benefit to the student because now they know how to talk about what they learned, which is a big issue. As Lynn highlighted, the needs and really the dearth of candidates coming into the healthcare area, one of the most growing areas is that unlicensed position in the healthcare market. And so this also helps a huge number of people who want to get directly into the workforce, may want to do post-secondary education down the road, but also need the means to pay for that. They can earn a certificate that opens the door to opportunities for them and opens the door for their potential college career as well. So fantastic resource that way. Now, a little bit about the certificate itself. It is built to be taken under a 90-minute window, so it's very doable to have that happen within one class period. The average time it takes for a test taker to actually take the exam is about 50 minutes. And so it can easily be done within one class period. Now, that's really important to teachers because as they set up their proctoring environment and the students come in and do that, they need to ensure that those things can happen within one period. The exam is summative by nature. It evaluates the skill sets and the knowledge that have occurred over the entire pathway of learning. However, there are formative parts to how we provide the information. I'll show that in just a little bit on some of the reporting. Importantly, it is set up so that all different types of IEPs for learners can participate. We can unrandomize questions, we can extend time, and we can take advantage of all the capabilities within the browser as the exam is delivered through browser technologies. Now, importantly, the exam is reviewed by subject matter experts every year. This helps validate that the content is clearly sound, that it is up to date, and that it is moving forward in the right direction. It also helps ensure that the integrity of the exam is in place and that it is valid from a content standpoint on an ongoing basis. Every single item throughout the test is validated on an annual basis as well. Now, the exam navigation of the actual exam is quite intuitive, and it really speaks to the strengths of utilizing a system like ours because it allows the students to naturally flow from question to question. You can see on the right-hand side of that screen, there are numbers there from 1 to 12 in this case. This is just a sample test. But those represent individual questions. And so a student can jump around. Not only can they just go next, 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 or back, but they can jump around as they need to. And we also provide the ability for a candidate to flag a question if they need to think about it and come back to it. Now, this has been very positive, and educators and students alike have really praised the fact that they have this feel to the exam experience. Now, beyond just multiple choice questions, which are great item types for an exam, we also provide a host of enhanced question types, from drag and drop, from labeling to grouping, all these other types that involve graphics and the capabilities that we can get by providing a more contextual and rich environment for students to test in. That helps us evaluate whether the students really know their information or not. And lastly, I'll just mention that the experience for the exam proctors is very streamlined. This is very important to us, as most of these products are delivered in the high school. It's very important that not a lot of time be spent in setting up the system. And so literally, a proctor can get in and set up the system for the students and have every student testing within 5 minutes of starting the class. It's that easy. So that's very important from an educator standpoint. Now, as I mentioned, one of the most important things that the assessment does is not only does it provide a fantastic resource and outcome for the student in earning a certificate, but it also provides teachers and administrators very valuable data that they need to improve their programs. As Scott mentioned, one of the goals of the overall consortium is to ensure consistency from school to school, district to district, state to state, so that people can improve our health system. And so for teachers, what we found over the years is that exam data only becomes relevant to them if these 4 things are in place. The goals of the exam need to be relevant to the teacher. What that means is that if I'm teaching in health science, I need to have a very validated health science exam that I'm driving towards. The data that I get back from that also has to be relevant. I need to be able to see that by standard, by class, exam, proctor, by student, by my district. All of that is very important. And then also I need to be able to see the growth that happens from students. So pre and post testing becomes very important in that aspect also. Next would be the timeliness of that reporting. Instant reporting becomes critical to teachers. If they do not get the feedback quickly, then it becomes less and less valuable to them over time. And so all of the reporting within the system after students take the exam gets pushed back up to the proctor, the school, the district, and even to the state for instant access to those results. And this is really also important for state and federal reporting requirements. And so administrators can export the results for this information to provide back to Perkins, for example, very, very easily. And lastly, the data that comes back needs to be instructive. It needs to provide that roadmap for self-improvement for the teacher. Now, let me give you a couple of examples. Here's just a list of different exams that we offer. Let me skip to one that I think is probably the most important. This is called the Proctor Standards Report. And really what it does is it gives you a view of what standards are being taught. It gives you the blueprint, so how many questions and points are available. But then down below on the assessment summary, you see that there's columns there labeled 1 through 11. Well, those directly relate to the standards. So Column 1 is the academic foundation scores. Column 2, the communication scores, et cetera, et cetera. And so a teacher can look, they'll receive this report from the proctor. They can look very quickly and at a glance, they can tell almost exactly what's going on with the class. Then they can drill down to individual students and see how they're performing and what needs to be improved. At the bottom of that report, you see there's a summary line. That is the summary for the entire class. So now as a teacher, I can look to see which areas I'm strong in and which areas I need to improve. So looking at this report, the lower scores are on Standard 1, on Standard 3, and it looks like on Standard 10, where the scores were in the 60s. And so those would be areas where the instructor could look for improving their personal curriculum and maybe even saying, oh, you know, I lack some knowledge and skills in this area. This is a good area for professional development for me. And then the very last line, it provides a summary of a state average so that that individual instructor can compare themselves across others. The last report that I'll show here is a summary. Now this is a condensed version of this, but this is the one that shows those growth. It shows the pre-exam and the post-exam, and then you see at the very right edge of that the growth that happened for a student. So this can be given over a period of time to those students so that they can see how they're doing and the teacher can see the growth in their area. The last thing that I'll mention is that the cost effectiveness of the program. One thing that was very important to the consortium was to provide an assessment that really was available not only to a select few students, which a lot of programs are, but to every student. And so the pricing for the program is priced such that every student can participate, take advantage of the assessment, and then also have that opportunity to earn the certificate itself. And I'll just mention here that participating as a member in the consortium is very, very beneficial just from the standpoint of getting a better price on the exams if you're testing a lot of students. So with that, I'll turn the time over and thank you for participating and turn the time over to Kate.
Thank you. Hi, everyone. I'm Kate Blauturn with Advanced CTE, which was formerly known as the National Association of State Directors for Career and Technical Education Consortium. And we are a nonprofit that represents state-level leaders who oversee career technical education in all 50 states and U.S. territories, and being a voice for high-quality CTE here in Washington, D.C. and across the country. We also have served as the manager of the National Career Clusters Framework since 2002, which will provide some good context for the work that the National Consortium has been doing really since their inception, but particularly in the last year or so with their new standards. So really briefly, just for a little bit of context and the work of the consortium, I'm going to share a bit of background and information on the National Career Clusters Framework, which the new standards and overall work of the consortium largely align to. Briefly, career clusters are simply a way of organizing CT programs, curriculum partnerships, anchored around groupings of occupations and industry, rather than focusing on training for specific careers. The career clusters have been around in one form or another since the 1970s, but it's really been since in the last 15 years or so that the career clusters have emerged as a new standard or common framework that the vast majority, nearly every state uses in some form or another for organizing their programs, as well as connecting their education systems with the needs of employers. So as you can see, here are the 16 career clusters, which altogether represent the entire world of work. So we often say you can name any single career or occupation, and it will fit in one or more of these career clusters. Very comprehensive and intentionally so. And the 16 career clusters were formalized through the State Career Clusters Initiative, which was funded by the Department of Education and managed by Advanced CT starting in 2002. Each cluster was adopted by a state or a group of states, and to actually own kind of the development of that cluster and really flesh it out, done in partnership with business and industry groups. The National Consortium was the lead industry partner for the development of the health science career clusters, which led to the development of knowledge and skill statements, essentially expectations that undergird the career clusters, and plans of study that support students' progression through the pathways on their way to their career, bridging both secondary and post-secondary education and training programs. Critically, the career clusters were a significant shift forward for career technical education. It moved away from programs and courses that were focused on preparing students for individual jobs and in a limited number of fields to one that encompasses all career opportunities and values career exploration and flexibility as much as specialized technical skills. And I think you can absolutely see this within the standards that the consortium has, as well as their aligned assessments and the way that it's being implemented in the field and classrooms, as well as through HOSA. So to explore how the career cluster works in practice, here's a breakdown of the health science career cluster. Each cluster has pathways under them, and each of these pathways is organized to prepare students for a range of careers, again, not focused on a single career. And so as demonstrated by just a handful of the careers available for students completing a program of study in the diagnostic services career pathway, you can see that there are a range of opportunities, and the career cluster and pathway are intended to prepare students for a wide array of opportunities, those that require simply a high school diploma or some industry credential, all the way up to advanced degrees, be them medical degrees or PhDs in research. The health science career cluster encompasses more than 300 career specialties, and as we saw earlier, that number will likely increase as the field continues to evolve, emerge, new technologies, new demands from clients come on the scene. This number will only grow over time. And just as a note, it's for these 5 career pathways that the National Consortium has organized their standards. So here's a graphic that depicts the progression of knowledge and skills underlying the career cluster framework. Again, that's really aligned to the consortium's kind of theory of action and the way they've organized their standards and related materials. Again, this is focused on providing learners at all levels with the opportunity to explore careers and flexibly and adeptly move throughout careers over the course of their lifetime. So really giving them as many lifelong opportunities as possible. So putting this in the context of the recently updated National Consortium standards, the foundation standards, which cover things like communication, healthcare delivery systems, medical terminology, diseases and disorders, really are getting at the foundational career knowledge and skills, as well as some of the industry-specific knowledge and skills. When you look at the pathway standards, which are still fairly broad, but move with increasing specificity, are really getting at those career-specific knowledge and skills, and touching on some of the occupation-specific knowledge and skills. Although where you're really going to hit some of those occupation-focused skills are through, expectations set by industry credentials and licensures that might be required for specific jobs within the health science field, as well as experiences learned in work-based learning and through the upper end of post-secondary programs. And so this is the difference between standards that focus on an entire career cluster than those that are just focused on a specific career, that it's really giving students the full range of opportunities, really meeting students where they are, and allowing for the awareness and exposure that allows students to opt into the program, but also find out if it's not for them and move into a pathway that might be better aligned with their interests and opportunities moving forward. So the last point I wanted to make was around the value of cross-state standards and organizations like the consortium that can kind of bring some consistency to the system, right? There are clear benefits of having consistent cross-state standards and expectations to students, employers, and educators at the secondary and post-secondary alike. Moving from 50 standards to one consistent set allows, for students in terms of mobility, being able to move across and within states and be able to not lose learning where they are, be able to, given how much mobility and the increased mobility we've seen in recent years among students, it just seems it's an obvious benefit. Certainly for employers, knowing that they're having a consistency of expectations, they have a touch point they can put their demands and their expectations aligned to, and also knowing what they're getting on the outer end, as has been discussed a couple of times. And similar with post-secondary, having kind of a common benchmark of what students have learned with they can do and able to demonstrate has, huge benefits to them, and then all of that comes back to the students over time. So with that, there's my contact information, and I'm going to turn it back to Scott to close us out.
Hi there, Scott. Did you have any final words for our viewers?
I'd like to thank everybody who has participated on the webinar, and hopefully that's provided some information to those who will be viewing it to see how promoting a common cross-state set of standards for health sciences makes a whole bunch of sense. And there's some an email address there that you can contact me if you have any questions, or if you would like to have copies of any of the presentations. Thank you.
Thank you so much, everyone who joined us today, and keep a lookout for more online seminars on ACT's Twitter account and Facebook accounts, as well as ACT's online seminar page on our official website. Have a great rest of the day. Thank you.